And so for anybody, to me, that's living a life of purpose is asking themselves where, let's say you're about joy, where am I experiencing joy? Where am I helping people experience joy? And where am I not? Because that back and forth is going to hold true all the time. You're never going to be 100% perfect. It's never going to be loving everybody. But that you can always be asking the question, how can I bring more love here? You can also be asking, what do I need? And this shows up a lot in relationships. Sure. Yeah. People have the sense of give, but they aren't willing. They don't have the courage. And I'm not saying that I do, but when I do have the courage to ask for what I want or say, hey, I need this, that's when things happen more and you're able to, love each other more. So and this is what I actually really love about this, my understanding of purpose is this back and forth, because there's going to be places in your life where it is and places where it's not. Sometimes you need to look at your short-term gains. Like, I got to take care of myself. I got to go for a walk by myself. Yeah. I got to leave this meeting. I got to separate and go take care of myself. And other times you have to be like, you know what? I got to put my big boy pants on and go have that tough conversation. And both are 100% aligned with purpose. And it's that awareness of when to kind of go back and forth.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you clarified helpful. That. Yeah. And I think what you're articulating too is what also I think makes this so hard for people, because it isn't, you can't put your hands on it. It's very fluid. It's very slippery in that regard. You do need to constantly be questioning. Sometimes it's a back and forth. You're never going to be perfect and you have to accept that. But at the same time, you're striving to get better constantly. And it's so hard for people to have back to clarity on like, okay, I have it. I'm on the right path. I'm doing it right. And I think for a lot of people, myself very much included, for much of my life, maybe still to an extent, it's too big of a bet to place. Like, if I'm not going to know for sure, I'll just revert to what feels easiest and most comfortable for me. What are the things you'd say, Joey, like very practically for people that are going through this or thinking about, like, and I don't mean this to sound like a corny cliche question. I mean it genuinely, like, what are the things that give you some confidence that I am doing it right? Right? Because it is so fluid and so hard to identify. How do you know you're on the right track when you are?
I think there's two things that come to mind. There's one, just awareness of what's going on. One of the things you can start to do is ask yourself, okay, what are the thoughts I tell myself that get in the way? Like, people don't like me, or I'm not good enough, or I suck, or, whatever your limiting beliefs are. You can take a moment and start to understand how they actually feel in your body. Like, what is it like? I get very, when people don't like me is one that comes up for me a lot. And I get very defensive and angry and justified, like why I can't do something or why things aren't working out. As I'm saying this, I'm thinking of all this stuff that
and you probably feel yourself tightening up a little bit as you say.
Right? I'm like, oh, and so just being able to notice that, and then that, and because we're not going to be able to make those limiting beliefs go away. I have very, very little control over whether they show up or not. But I can recognize, okay, they're there, then what can I do? And then you can start to take, and again, this is about building up muscles. It's about moving forward. So recognizing things and then be able to act, okay. And then you can ask yourself a series of questions. Okay, if what can I do here to bring myself more love? Whether, whatever that is, or what can I do for somebody else? It would be a question. And then the other thing is to embrace the idea of a recovery process, because you're not going to be perfect. You're going to stumble. Then also a celebration process. How can I acknowledge where I stumbled and then recover from that and keep going and restart? And also, how can I celebrate the fact that I took any steps at all and move forward? And it's a hard thing. It's this weird thing, because we want to be like, all like rah, we win. But the reality is for most of us, life is some back and forth. And not even that, it's, right now in your life, I'm going to guess there's places where you are fully yourself and you're just kicking butt in all sorts of ways. And there's places where you aren't. And I know that's for me. It's true for everybody.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think it's building up that muscle, be able to be like, yeah, you know what? I suck here, but you know what? I did pretty good here. and it's avoiding that what is that has to be perfect, or like I am great, or I do suck. It's just recognizing neither one are 100% true. Yeah. And coming back to the question, What can I do to bring more of myself to this? What can I do to help other people?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting because I think as we're coming towards the end, I think that there's kind of two threads to what you're saying, at least as I'm kind of processing, right? Not saying I'm processing it right, but like you started almost at the very like base primal level of that feeling of love, goodness, whatever you want to call it, and those moments. I really like the use of the video kind of thought exercise because that makes it very visceral, I think, for people, right? And literally when people go through it, and even people listening, of like, oh yeah, like that feels awesome, like that's amazing, and you can literally feel it in your body, and there's that aspect of it. As you've explained that you kind of talked through it to some extent, you've kind of systematized it, and you've put a process around it, and it's more of like a process driven approach to get there. And I think that's good. Obviously, I think if that can be done, I wonder if for some people, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself and projecting onto others, but that former one for me seems to resonate a little bit more just because there's something, and I think it's where we started, there's something so tangible about it. The process of living is so messy, so complex, doing all the things you've been saying, trying to get to the place you're trying to get to. I mean, it's in some ways it's almost impossible. It's obviously possible, but it's almost impossible. um and I think there's something so real and tangible about that feeling of love, like you started with, that makes me feel like, okay, that I can wrap my head around, that I can understand, even when it feels impossible and confusing. And I don't know if I'm doing it the right way. I can check in on that. Does it feel that good? Because if it doesn't feel that good, there's probably more work to be done. And if it does, okay, that's a good sign. That means I'm on the right path. So again, just kind of my observation of it. I think there's something to that because at least for me, I think sometimes when I followed the processes too much, it almost gives an implication that like, oh, it's just simple. And I know that's not what you're saying. It's just simple. If you follow the process, you get it. And sometimes you don't. Exactly what you're saying. It fails. It doesn't work. And I think rooting it also, the process with that rooting and that just pure primal feeling of love is a really interesting way to do it that makes it kind of click for me a little bit more. So I think that's cool.